guys, it's Alice, and today I am gonna go through all of the books that I showed you in various TBRs that I did on this channel last year and see how many of them I actually read. So this idea was suggested by quite a lot of you guys actually, which is the main reason I'm doing it, because I don't know how interesting this is gonna turn out, because I am quite aware that I am not very good at sticking to these TBRs, even though I make them all the time. Now, I always make two big TBRs in the beginning of each year, where I talk about loads of books I want to read that year. I am not very good at sticking to those. I make them every year kind of just because it's fun and it's like tradition now. And then seasonally, I make like a smaller TBR, and then I'll make TBRs if there's like a readathon or something. And from what I can see, in 2019 I made 10 TBR videos. So we're just gonna go through them and see how I did. If I was going to guess, I would say I maybe read like 25 or 30% of the books I say I'm going to read. I don't really know. Some of the TBR videos that I make, I do say like I'm showing you a lot of books, but I'm not planning on reading all of them. These are just the ones that I'm choosing between, if that makes sense. Maybe we should keep score up in the corner somewhere just to see, because I think maybe that could be fun. I am going to go through these fairly quickly, because if not we would be here all day. So buckle up and let's bask in my inability to read what I say I'm going to read. I'm also going to have to look down here quite a lot because this is where my computer is, so sorry about that. But let's just get started. The first video that I made was 10 fiction books I want to read in 2019, and the first book on here is Lethal White by Robert Galbraith, which I haven't read, so we're off to a good start. Fire and Blood by George R. R. Martin, which I also haven't read. Exit West by Mohsin Hamid, which I did read. Then we have Bury What We Cannot Take by Kristen Chen, didn't read that one. Everyone Knows You Go Home by Natalia Sylvester, didn't read that one either. Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison, didn't read that one either. I really should though, because I really want to start getting into Toni Morrison's books. Then we have Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, didn't read that one either, so I'm doing very well with this list so far. Then I put on The Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham, haven't read it yet. A Grain of Wheat by an author whose name I don't know how to pronounce, haven't read that one either. But then lastly we have Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, which I very proudly have read. So unsurprisingly, didn't do that well with that particular list, but maybe I did better with the next one, which is 10 non-fiction books I want to read in 2019. And on here first we have got Becoming by Michelle Obama, which I did read and didn't love as much as everyone else seemed to, but it was kind of fun to read at like the height of its hype. Then we have The Gendered Brain by Gina Rippin, haven't read it yet, although it does sound fascinating. A Mind of Its Own by Cordelia Fine, also didn't read that, but also sounds fascinating. Heroes by Stephen Fry, did read that one and really enjoyed it. 21 Lessons for the 21st Century by Yuval Noah Harari, read it, very interesting, and I'm pretty sure that that appears in another TBR video later. Then we have A New Map of Wonders by Casper Henderson, still haven't read it. Penguin Cover to Cover, I haven't read it, but I've read in it, like pieces in it, but I guess that doesn't really count. Ways of Seeing by John Berger, haven't read it yet, but it's very short, so I really should. Battling the Gods by Tim Whitmarsh, this one I actually finished quite recently, so even though this was a TBR for 2019, I'm just gonna count it because I need it. And then lastly we have What a Time to Be Alone by Chidera Eguru, which I still haven't read. Next we have got the March Mystery Madness TBR that I did, and this is one of those videos where I showed a lot of books and I wasn't gonna read all of them, but I just included the books that I was gonna choose between. And the first one was The Mystery of Edwin Drood by Charles Dickens, haven't read it yet. Blood and Circuses by Carrie Greenwood, did read that one. The Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith, didn't read that one, although I really want to. My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite, Read it and really enjoyed it, and that's one of those books that I gave 3 out of 5 stars when I finished it, but I have thought about that book a lot since then, so maybe it's actually like 4 out of 5. I also mentioned The Haunting of Henry Twist by Rebecca F. John, haven't read it. Murder in Belgravia by Lynn Brittany, read it, really didn't like it. 3-Act Tragedy by Agatha Christie, didn't read it. And then There Were None by Agatha Christie, which I read and loved. Then we've got my spring TBR, where I had Bienes Historia by Maja Lunde, which I read and very much enjoyed, and the English title of that is The History of Bees. Then we had Ubik by Philip K. Dick, read it, didn't really understand a whole lot, but it was quite an experience to read. In the Beginning Was the Sea by Tomas Gonzalez, read that one too. The Priory by Dorothy Whipple, didn't read that one. And The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood. Didn't read it, although I really need to read that too. I really want to get into more Atwood, and then I just never do. The next one I made was my summer TBR, where we have The Waves by Virginia Woolf. Still haven't read it, even though I've shown it off many times. Terra Nullius by Claire G. Coleman. Read it, really liked it. Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Haven't read it yet, even though I keep mentioning it. The Diary of a Bookseller by Sean Bithell, haven't read it. Poirot Investigates by Agatha Christie, haven't read it. Then in the fall, I made another one of those videos where I wasn't planning on reading all of the books that I mentioned, it was just the books that I was going to choose between from, and it was Gothic fiction I want to read, and the first one on there is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. No, I still haven't read it, even though it's been in various TBRs over like several years. I don't know, I never get around to that book. I really want to, but for some reason I never do. Then we have The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. I did read it and very much enjoyed it. The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins, didn't read it. The Lost Man by Mary Shelley, didn't read that one either. Vathek by William Beckford. Read it and it was a really weird story, but it was worth reading. And then The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole. Didn't read that one. Then I mentioned The Vampire and Other Tales by John Polidori. Didn't read it. The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe. And this one I actually started and I spent like 2 weeks trying to get into it and I just could not get into that book. And I feel like I wasted so much time just trying and forcing myself to like get into it and I just couldn't. I might read it later, I don't really know. The last one I mentioned was Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, and I didn't read that one. I do think with this one, all of the books in it were classics, and I read classics quite a lot slower than contemporary books, so I'm really not surprised that I didn't read a lot of the ones in that video. Next, I did an autumn TBR, where we had On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. Haven't read it, but it's pretty high on the list of books I want to read this year. Ghost Stories by Everyman's Library. I didn't read the whole thing, but I read a couple of stories in it on Halloween, so I guess that doesn't really count because it was only like 3 stories. The Perfect Nanny by Leila Slimani, read it. Fell by Jen Ashworth, didn't read it. With the End in Mind by Catherine Mannix, read it, and it was really good. Alright, so we've only got 3 left to go through now, which is good because this is a lot. The next one I made was my nonfiction November TBR, which again, one of those videos where I showed a lot of books and was just going to choose between them, which is what I did. The first one on there was The Woman Warrior by Maxine Hong Kingston, which I still haven't read. A Truth Universally Acknowledged, edited by Susanna Carson, didn't read that one either. Asking for It by Kate Harding, which I did read. Then we have 21 Lessons for the 21st Century by Yuval Noah Harari. Already mentioned this one and counted it as read. No Friend But the Mountain by Baruch Buchani, haven't read it yet. Unnatural Causes by Dr. Richard Shepard, read it and loved it. It was one of my favorite books that I read last year. From Here to Eternity by Caitlin Doughty, read and loved that one too. The Warrior Queens by Antonia Fraser, didn't get around to it. The Drunkard's Walk by Leonard Mlodinov, didn't read that one. And They Can't Kill Us All by Wesley Lowery, which I also didn't read. Second to last, we've got my winter TBR, and just looking at this one, I can see I did a great job. We have The Toymakers by Robert Dinsdale, The Book of Edda by Meg Ellison, Vixen by Rosie Garland, Gulburet by Camilla Lackberg, Lethal Wife by Robert Galbraith, and I didn't read any of them. Although technically winter is not over yet, so I still have a little bit of time on that one. Lastly, I made a holiday TBR in December where we had Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban by J.K. Rowling, which I read, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, which I also read, The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, read that one too and loved it, 10 Minutes, 38 Seconds in This Strange World by Elif Shafak, which I finished recently and really liked. And then we have Greenbanks by Dorothy Whipple and Wild Journeys by Bruce Ansley, none of which I got to. So if I have counted correctly, I in total showed you 71 different books in these videos and I read 25 of them. And Google tells me that that is 35%, which honestly, I don't think is that bad. Like, that's higher than I thought it was going to be. And like I said, a lot of these videos, or not a lot of them, but some of them, I showed a lot of books and I wasn't planning on reading all of them, so if you don't count those, I actually did quite well. Okay guys, that was a lot, but I hope you enjoyed it. I actually thought it was kind of fun to go through all of these and see how I did. It might be interesting to do this like once a year just to see if I get any better at it, or in all likelihood I'll probably get worse. Either way, I'd love to know if you guys make TBRs and how good you are at sticking to them, and do you really care? And I will see you soon. Bye!